When I need to come up with ideas, I tend to give myself some constraints or a frame of mind is usually what I like to call it, because that way I have some limitations and I don't put as much stress on my creative senses. Because being creative is not necessarily always about just forcing yourself to come up with the best idea ever. It's usually solving problems. This episode is going to be all about me figuring out what my first project in Dreams is going to be. So this is not going to be the epic experience that I have in mind that I want to create for Dreams, but this is going to be the first project that I try to learn the tools, to learn what's possible, what the opportunities are, to really just, it's just my first deep dive in Dreams. For me, it kind of makes sense to come up with a game mechanic, because that way I'll be playing with the aesthetics, the way it looks, the way it feels, but also logic. And I think it's a good way for me to figure out what's possible in Dreams and really get my hands dirty and try a lot of different things. So in coming up with a game mechanic, I've decided to look for something that is satisfying but simple. Because this is going to be my first project and I don't want to overcomplicate things. I still need to learn how Dreams works, how the controls work, and I need to allow myself a bit of space, and I need to have patience with myself to really make sure that I'm going to lay a good foundation for when I start doing like the actual project. So I'm writing down all of the different mechanics that I can come up with, and it's quite challenging, a bit more challenging than I expected, I guess. I catch myself already thinking about how possible it is, and that usually is a thing that kind of holds me back in coming up with concepts. So I decided to just write down every idea that I have, regardless of how difficult it might seem. Because at the moment it's all about quantity and not about the quality of the ideas. I just need to write down everything that comes to mind. So I also try to think of categories. Okay, what if it's the mechanic is you have to mine certain minerals or certain items by doing a certain action. By thinking of it in that way, I can expand on that and think of more ways that you could basically do an action and then get an item. In thinking of what would feel satisfying, I noticed that I was leaning towards this idea of the player growing or shrinking based on certain things, or this idea of hitting something and just the satisfying animation and the feedback. So the first concept that I have in mind is destroy the rock. As the player, you need to jump on this rock and do that repeatedly so that the rock shatters. But every time you hit the rock, you shrink. And you need to have a certain size to be able to do damage on the rock. And I'm thinking there might be these objects around it that you need to eat to grow. So that's the first concept. The second concept I have is feed the kid. And this is all about you as a player having to scavenge for these objects that you can feed to a smaller version of you that is in the same space. And the idea is that as the kid grows to a certain size, it'll start following you around, and that'll allow you to move on to the next level. And the final concept is stomp the world. It's this idea that as you jump, the world around you is being built. So it's this idea that underneath the ground there is a giant city, and every time you stomp the ground, that city lifts above the surface. But you need to have a certain size to do that stomp. So again, you have to scavenge for items to grow. Choosing a concept to go with can be very tricky. But I think in this case, it's very important that I choose a concept that will make me touch a lot of different parts of Dreams. That's why I think Stomp the World is the one that I should go for. It is a concept that would require me to play around with the environment, but also with objects and also with the player. I'll be thinking about what that world looks like, what the player looks like, what the feedback is gonna look like. So when you stomp, what type of animations will you see and things like that. As well as like, okay, what are these objects that you're eating to grow? I think these are gonna be interesting things to solve. I don't know aesthetically what it's gonna look like, but I think it's gonna be simple just so I learn the tools. But it's exciting. It's gonna be my first game. I'm also very curious what the players want. So if you have any ideas or think I should try something else, or please tell me in the comments. And of course, like and subscribe to stay in the loop. Talk soon.